Maya Chen stared at her phone screen, the notification glowing at 2:47 a.m. Another missed call from Jake followed by a string of increasingly desperate texts. Need you to call me back ASAP. It's urgent. Maya, please. I'm in trouble. Where are you? This can't wait until morning. She knew what urgent meant in Jake's vocabulary. It meant he'd lost again at poker, at the track, at whatever new scheme had promised easy money this week. It meant another frantic phone call where her 25-year-old brother would sound like a scared child, and she'd find herself reaching for her checkbook despite the growing knot in her stomach. Maya had been 23 when their father died, suddenly of a heart attack, leaving behind a grief-stricken widow and 3 adult children who seemed incapable of functioning without him. Somehow, without anyone explicitly deciding it, Maya had stepped into the void he'd left behind. Not as a daughter seeking comfort, but as the new pillar everyone leaned on when the world got too heavy. It started small, helping Mom navigate the insurance paperwork, covering Jake's rent when he lost his job at the auto shop, lending Sarah money for her kids' school supplies when her divorce left her struggling. But small favors had a way of growing into expectations, and expectations had morphed into demands so gradual, Maya hadn't noticed until she was drowning in them. 5 years later, Maya's life had become a carefully orchestrated performance of self-sacrifice. Her successful marketing career, which should have been a source of pride, had instead become simply the means to fund everyone else's emergencies. The promotion she'd earned last year meant more money for Jake's debts. The bonus she'd received meant she could cover Sarah's mortgage when her ex-husband stopped paying child support. Her own dreams, the photography classes she'd wanted to take, the trip to Europe she'd been planning since college, the therapy she desperately needed to process her own grief, remained perpetually postponed. Her dating life had withered away entirely. How could she explain to potential partners that she couldn't go away for a weekend because Jake might call with a crisis? That she couldn't commit to dinner plans because Mom might need a ride to the doctor? That she'd rather not talk about her family because she was exhausted by them before she even opened her mouth? The irony wasn't lost on Maya that in trying to hold her family together, she'd let her own life fall apart. She lived in a studio apartment she could barely afford because every spare dollar went to someone else's problems. She ate takeout most nights because she was too drained to cook after handling everyone else's emotional labor. She lay awake wondering when it would end, when someone else would step up, when she'd be allowed to just be a daughter and sister instead of a surrogate parent. But the call that came on Thursday afternoon shattered even her cynical expectations. Maya? Her mother's voice was tight with panic. We need to talk. Can you come over right now? An hour later, Maya sat in her childhood living room, surrounded by the assembled tribunal of her family. Mom perched on the edge of the couch, her face pale and drawn. Sarah sat across from her, arms crossed defensively, while Jake slouched in their father's old recliner, unable to meet anyone's eyes. $15,000 is missing from my retirement account, Mom said without preamble. The bank says it was withdrawn last week. Maya's stomach dropped. She looked at Jake, whose face had gone ashen. She'd seen that expression before, the same look he'd worn as a kid when caught breaking something valuable, the same wide-eyed panic that preceded his most elaborate lies. I don't understand, Maya said carefully. Who has access to that account? The silence stretched until Jake finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I needed to borrow some money. Just temporarily, I was going to pay it back before anyone noticed. You stole from Mom? Sarah's voice cracked. Jake's head snapped up, suddenly animated. It wasn't stealing, Maya's been managing Mom's finances anyway. She was supposed to keep track of this stuff. I thought, he swallowed hard, his lie taking shape as he spoke. I thought she knew, I thought she'd moved the money around or something. Maybe she made a mistake with the investments, or… What? Maya felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Jake, I don't manage Mom's retirement account. I've never even seen the statements. But you handle all her other stuff, Jake pressed on, his desperation making him bold. The insurance, the bills, all that financial planning you're always talking about. How was I supposed to know which accounts you were managing and which ones you weren't? Maya stared at her brother in disbelief. She could see the exact moment he realized he'd found his lifeline. Blame the sister who'd always fixed everything before. If Maya was responsible for their mother's finances, then Maya was responsible for the missing money. It was perfect in its cruel simplicity. Jake, she said slowly, you know that's not true, But as she looked around the room, Maya realized with growing horror that her family's expressions weren't reflecting the outrage she expected to see at Jake's obvious lie. Instead, she saw something worse, the dawning relief of people who'd been handed an explanation they wanted to believe. Actually, Sarah said slowly, her voice gaining confidence, that does make sense. Maya, you are always telling us what we should do with our money. Maybe you got confused about which accounts you were handling. Maya felt her chest tighten. Sarah, I've never touched Mom's retirement fund. I don't even know what bank it's with. But you're always giving Mom financial advice, Sarah continued, warming to the theme. Remember when you told her to consolidate her accounts, and you set up that automatic bill pay system? How is Jake supposed to know what you've been doing behind the scenes? Behind the scenes? Maya's voice cracked. I helped Mom organize her monthly bill. I've never had access to her investment accounts, and you know it. Mom shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Well, honey, you do tend to take over when it comes to money matters. Just last month you insisted on reviewing my insurance policies. Because you asked me to. Maya stood up, her hands shaking. You called me crying because you couldn't understand the renewal notice. I spent 3 hours on the phone with the insurance company for you. Nobody asked you to do that, Mom said quietly. You just did it, like you always do. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Maya looked from face to face, searching for some sign that they remembered the truth. The late-night phone calls, the desperate pleas for help, the way they'd all leaned on her when everything fell apart. This is insane, Maya whispered. Jake, tell them the truth. You know I don't manage Mom's retirement account. Jake's eyes darted around the room before landing on his hands. I thought you did. I mean, you handle everything else. The bills, the bank stuff, telling us all how to budget and invest. I just assumed, you assumed. Maya's voice rose. Or you needed someone to blame when your gambling debts caught up with you again. Gambling debts? Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Maya, that's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. Jake, how much do you owe this time? How much did you lose before you decided to steal from Mom? Jake's face flushed red. I don't have a gambling problem. I made some bad investments, that's all. And I wouldn't have had to borrow anything if you hadn't been so controlling about Mom's money that I didn't even know what was available. Maya stared at him in disbelief. Controlling? I've bailed you out 6 times in the past 2 years. I've given you over $20,000 of my own money to cover your bad investments. How is that controlling? Because you never just help, Jake shot back, his voice gaining strength. You always have to lecture me about it. You always have to make me feel like garbage for needing help. Maybe if you'd been more transparent about Mom's finances, I wouldn't have made this mistake. What mistake? Maya's voice was deadly quiet. Taking money that wasn't yours? That's not a mistake, Jake. That's theft. Maya, Mom's voice carried a warning tone. That's your brother you're talking to, and I'm your daughter, Maya said, turning to face her mother. Your daughter who's been supporting this family for 5 years. Who's covered Jake's rent, Sarah's mortgage, your medical bills, your car repairs, Nobody asked you to do any of that, Sarah interrupted. You just inserted yourself into our lives and started throwing money around like you were buying our gratitude. Maya felt the world tilt sideways. Buying your gratitude? Sarah, you called me sobbing 3 weeks ago because you couldn't make your mortgage payment. You begged me to help you. I was upset, Sarah said, defensively. People say things when they're upset. I never expected you to just take over like that. Take over? Maya looked around the room at the 3 people she'd sacrificed everything for. I've been trying to help you, all of you, for 5 years. Help? Mom's voice was sharp now. Honey, what you've been doing isn't helping. It's controlling. You swoop in and fix everything before we even have a chance to figure it out ourselves. How do you think that makes us feel? Maya's mouth opened and closed without sound. She felt like she was drowning, gasping for air in a room that had suddenly become foreign to her. And now, Mom continued, her voice growing stronger, we find out you've been mismanaging my retirement account, and you want to blame Jake for your mistakes. I haven't been managing your retirement account. Maya shouted. Jake stole that money to pay off his gambling debts, and you're all going to sit here and pretend it's my fault. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya looked at each of them in turn, searching for some flicker of recognition, some acknowledgement of the truth they all knew but refused to speak. Instead, she saw 3 people who had found their scapegoat and weren't going to let her go. I think, Mom said slowly, we all need some space to think about this. Maya, maybe you should go home and really consider what you've done to this family. Maya felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, but something deeper. The part of her that had believed, despite everything, that her family loved her enough to see the truth when it mattered most. What I've done to this family, she repeated softly. Yes, Mom said firmly. All this controlling behavior, this financial manipulation. I'm disappointed in who you've become, Maya. I really am. Maya stood there for a long moment, looking at the three people she'd given her life to protect. Then she picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Maya, Sarah called after her. Where are you going? Maya paused at the threshold, her hand on the doorknob. I'm going to give you exactly what you want, she said without turning around. Space. Maya sat in her car outside her childhood home for 20 minutes, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The house looked the same as always, the blue shutters her father had painted the summer before he died, the garden her mother had let go wild with grief, the driveway where she'd learned to ride a bike and had her first kiss and received the phone call that would change everything 5 years ago. But something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in her adult life, Maya saw the house not as home, but as the place where she'd been systematically destroyed by the people who claimed to love her. The drive back to her studio apartment passed in a blur. Maya moved through her evening routine mechanically. Microwaved leftovers she couldn't taste, a shower that didn't wash away the sick feeling in her stomach, an attempt at sleep that left her staring at the ceiling until dawn. But as the sun rose, something crystallized in Maya's mind. The fog of shock and hurt began to clear, replaced by a cold, analytical clarity she recognized from her most successful marketing campaigns. She was done being their victim. She was done being their scapegoat. Most importantly, she was done enabling their dysfunction. If they wanted space, she would give them space. All of it. Maya called in sick to work, the first time in 3 years, and spent the day methodically dismantling the infrastructure of dependency she'd built around her family. She started with her phone, scrolling through years of desperate messages, emergency calls, and guilt-laden voicemails. With clinical precision, she blocked each number. Mom, Jake, Sarah, even her Aunt Carol, who'd become a flying monkey for family drama. Next came the financial architecture. Maya logged into her banking app and canceled the automatic transfers she'd set up to Sarah's mortgage company. She called the credit card company and removed Jake as an authorized user, requesting a new card number for herself. The customer service representative asked if the card had been stolen. Yes, Maya said, without hesitation. It was. She spent 2 hours on the phone with various companies, removing her name as an emergency contact, authorized user, and secondary account holder from a dozen different services. Each deletion felt like cutting a rope that had been slowly strangling her. The most satisfying moment came when she called her mother's cell phone provider. Maya had been paying for the family plan for 3 years, a convenience she'd offered during her mother's financial struggles after Dad's death. I'd like to remove 3 lines from my account, she told the representative. Are you transferring the numbers to another account? The woman asked. No, Maya said. They can figure that out themselves. Maya's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia, whom she'd met through work, listened to the whole story over coffee the next morning. Patricia took notes in a neat, precise handwriting that reminded Maya why she'd chosen her. So to summarize, Patricia said, your brothers stole $15,000 from your mother's retirement account, blamed you for the theft, and your family has decided to make you the scapegoat rather than hold him accountable. That's correct. And you've been financially supporting all of them for years. Yes, Patricia tapped her pen against her notepad. Maya, I want you to understand something. What you're describing isn't just family dysfunction. Your brother has committed elder financial abuse. That's a felony. And what your family is doing to you, this coordinated blame shifting and emotional manipulation, it has a name. It's called scapegoating, and it's a form of psychological abuse. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Abuse. She'd been so focused on being the helper, the fixer, the responsible one, that she'd never considered she might be the victim. I don't want to press charges, Maya said quickly. I just want them to leave me alone. I understand, but I want you to document everything, just in case. And Patricia leaned forward. What you're planning to do, complete withdrawal, it's not cruel. It's necessary. You can't help people who refuse to help themselves. and you can't save people who are determined to destroy themselves. Maya spent the rest of the week implementing what she privately called Operation Invisible. She changed her phone number and gave the new one only to work colleagues and her few remaining friends. She set up mail forwarding to a P.O. box across town. She informed her building security that she was not to be contacted by anyone claiming to be family. They were to be treated as unwanted solicitors. Most crucially, she met with her HR director and updated her emergency contacts and beneficiaries. For 5 years, her family had been listed as the people to call if something happened to her. Now her emergency contact was Patricia, and her life insurance beneficiary was a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. "I'm going through a difficult family situation," Maya explained to her director. "If anyone claiming to be related to me contacts this office, please don't give them any information about my schedule or whereabouts. Refer them to building security." The final step was the hardest. Maya sat down at her laptop and began typing a document she titled, "The Truth About the Chen Family Finances." In meticulous detail, she documented every loan, every bailout, every emergency payment she'd made over the past 5 years. She included screenshots of bank transfers, copies of checks, and a particularly damning series of text messages from Jake thanking her for saving his life with various payments. She documented Jake's gambling problem with equal precision, the times he'd confessed his debts to her, the rehab program she'd researched and offered to pay for, which he'd refused, the pattern of escalating borrowing that had culminated in theft. She included records of Sarah's financial dependence, her mother's increasing demands for help, and the way all of them had rewritten history to cast her as the villain. The document was 17 pages long when she finished. Maya printed 3 copies, sealed them in separate envelopes, and locked them in her safe deposit box. Insurance, Patricia had called it, evidence, if she ever needed to defend herself. As Maya prepared for bed that night, she realized something had fundamentally changed in her. The constant knot of anxiety in her stomach, the one that had lived there so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be without it, was gone. For the first time in 5 years, her phone sat silent on the nightstand. No one needed her. No one was demanding her time, her money, her emotional labor. She was alone, but she wasn't lonely, she was free. Tomorrow the real test would begin. Tomorrow her family would start to realize what life looked like without Maya holding everything together. But tonight Maya slept peacefully for the first time in years, dreaming not of other people's problems, but of all the possibilities that opened up when you stopped setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. The first week passed in blissful silence. Maya threw herself into her work with renewed energy, finally able to focus without the constant interruption of family crises. She stayed late at the office, not because she was avoiding problems at home, but because she genuinely enjoyed the challenge of the new campaign she was developing. Her colleagues noticed the change immediately. "You seem different," her assistant Marcus commented on Friday afternoon. "More present, I guess. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." Maya smiled, realizing she'd been holding her breath for 5 years and had finally exhaled. The silence broke on Monday morning with a call to her office landline, a number she'd forgotten her family even had. "Maya Chen's office," Marcus answered professionally. Maya watched from her desk as his expression shifted from polite to confused to slightly alarmed. He covered the mouthpiece and whispered, "There's a woman claiming to be your mother. She says it's an emergency, and she needs to speak with you immediately." Maya shook her head and mouthed, "Take a message." Marcus nodded and returned to the call. "I'm sorry, but Chen is in meetings all day. I can take a message if you'd like." A pause. "No, I don't have her personal contact information to share. I can only take a message for business purposes." After he hung up, Marcus looked at Maya with concern. She sounded pretty upset. She kept saying it was about stolen money and family business. "Should I?" "No," Maya said calmly. "She's not actually my emergency contact anymore. If she calls again, just take a message and file it. Don't engage with the drama." But the calls didn't stop. By Wednesday, Maya's office had received 17 calls from various family members, each more frantic than the last. Her building's front desk reported that a distraught woman had tried to access Maya's floor, claiming her daughter was in danger and refusing to leave until security escorted her out. Maya's carefully constructed piece began to crack when she received a text from her friend Lisa. "Your brother showed up at my apartment last night asking if I knew where you were. He seemed pretty desperate. Is everything okay? Then another from her college roommate, Emma. Hey, got a weird call from someone claiming to be your sister. She said you'd gone missing and asked if I'd heard from you. What's going on? Maya realized her family was systematically contacting everyone in her social circle, spinning some version of the story that painted them as concerned relatives and her as a missing person. She spent her lunch break calling friends to explain the situation and ask them not to share any information about her whereabouts. Jesus, Maya, Lisa said when she called. Jake looked awful, like he hadn't slept in days. Are you sure you're okay? I'm better than I've been in years, Maya replied honestly, but I need you to not tell him that, or anything else about me. Can you do that? By the second week, the desperation in her family's attempts to reach her had escalated to a level that would have been comical if it weren't so invasive. Maya's doorman, Fernando, approached her with a stack of letters and packages. Miss Chen, I don't know what's going on, but your family has been sending these every day, he said, gesturing to the pile. Your mother came by yesterday crying, begging me to let her up. I told her what you said about not being disturbed, but she offered me $100 to slip a note under your door. Maya looked at the stack of unopened letters, recognizing the handwriting on each envelope. Her mother's careful script, Sarah's hurried scrawl, Jake's barely legible chicken scratch. Part of her was curious about what desperate pleas they contained, but a larger part of her knew that reading them would only drag her back into their dysfunction. Fernando, would you mind disposing of these? And any future ones? I don't want to see them. He nodded, understanding. Family troubles, huh? My sister went through something similar. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let people learn to solve their own problems. The third week brought news that Maya learned about through an unexpected source, her former coworker David, who'd left the company 6 months earlier. I saw something weird on Facebook, he told her over coffee. Your sister posted asking if anyone had seen you, saying the family was worried about your mental health. She made it sound like you'd had some kind of breakdown. Maya's coffee turned bitter in her mouth. What did she say exactly? Something about you disappearing after financial stress and family conflicts. She asked people to contact her if they saw you because they were concerned you might hurt yourself. David paused. Maya, that's not, I mean, you're okay, right? I'm fine, Maya said, but inside she was seething. They were trying to weaponize concern for her mental health, turning her necessary boundaries into evidence of instability. It was manipulative and cruel, and exactly the kind of thing she should have expected. The fourth week brought the nuclear option. Maya arrived at work to find 2 police officers waiting in the lobby. Are you Maya Chen? The younger officer asked. Yes. Is there a problem? We received a wellness check request from your family. They're concerned that you might be in danger, or experiencing a mental health crisis. Maya felt her carefully maintained composure slip. Officers, I'm not in danger. I'm not having a mental health crisis. I chose to limit contact with my family, and they're having trouble accepting that boundary. The older officer, who looked like he'd handled his share of family disputes, nodded slowly. We can see you're clearly fine, but your family filed a missing person report. We're going to need to close that out. A missing person report. Maya's voice rose. I'm not missing. I go to work every day. I live in the same apartment. I just changed my phone number. They said you'd disappeared after a family argument and hadn't been seen in weeks. Maya took a deep breath, recognizing that her family had forced her hand. Officers, I'm going to need to call my attorney. 20 minutes later, Patricia arrived at Maya's office building like a force of nature in a tailored suit. She spoke with the officers privately for several minutes, while Maya waited, watching through the glass doors of the lobby. When Patricia returned, she was smiling grimly. The missing person report has been withdrawn. I explained that you're an adult who chose to limit contact with family members due to ongoing harassment. The officers understand that you're safe and acting of your own free will. Can they keep filing reports? Maya asked, not without evidence of actual danger. But Maya, this escalation tells us something important. They're getting desperate. Whatever consequences they're facing from your absence, it's significant enough that they're willing to involve law enforcement. Patricia was right. As Maya would soon discover, the month of silence had created a cascade of consequences that her family was utterly unprepared to handle. Without Maya's constant intervention, their carefully balanced house of cards was collapsing, and they were finally being forced to confront the reality of their own choices. The question was, what would they be willing to do to get their scapegoat back? Maya got her answer on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. She was reviewing campaign metrics when Patricia called, her usually composed voice tight with anger. Maya, you need to get to my office immediately. Bring any documentation you have about your family's finances. What happened? Jake happened. He tried to take out a loan using you as collateral. The bank called me because they couldn't verify your employment information. Apparently he listed you as co-signing for a $50,000 personal loan. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. 50,000? It gets worse. When the bank couldn't reach you for verification, they discovered that someone had been calling various financial institutions over the past week, posing as you and trying to access account information. Maya, your brother has been attempting identity fraud. An hour later, Maya sat in Patricia's office, surrounded by the evidence of Jake's desperation. Bank records, credit applications, even an attempt to forge her signature on a loan document that the bank had flagged as suspicious. He's gotten sloppy, Patricia explained, spreading the documents across her desk. Desperate people make mistakes, and Jake's made several. This loan application claims you're cohabiting with him and jointly responsible for household expenses. He listed your old phone number as contact information and forged your signature on the preliminary paperwork. Maya stared at the signature that was supposed to be hers, a clumsy approximation that looked nothing like her actual handwriting. How did he think this would work? He probably didn't think. Based on these timestamps, he's been calling banks and credit card companies for over a week, claiming to be your husband or brother who needed to help manage your accounts due to your recent breakdown. Patricia's voice was ice cold. He's been telling people you're mentally incapacitated and he's your financial caretaker. The room spun around Maya. He's been telling people I'm mentally incapacitated. It's a common tactic in financial elder abuse cases. Create a narrative that the victim is unable to manage their own affairs, then position yourself as the responsible party who needs access to their accounts. Patricia leaned forward. Maya, this isn't just family drama anymore. This is criminal fraud, and we have enough evidence to press charges. I don't want to send Jake to prison. Then let's make sure he understands the alternative. 2 hours later, Maya found herself sitting in the conference room of Patricia's law firm, facing the assembled wreckage of her family. Jake looked like he'd aged 10 years in a month. His face gaunt, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting panic. Sarah sat beside him, her usual composure cracked, while their mother clutched a tissue box like a lifeline. Patricia had summoned them with a simple message: come immediately, or we file charges this afternoon. Thank you all for coming, Patricia began, her voice professionally neutral. I've asked you here because your family member Jake Shen has committed several felonies over the past week, and we need to discuss how to proceed. Felonies? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Patricia opened a folder and began reading in a steady clinical tone. Attempted identity theft, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Jake has attempted to use Maya's identity to secure loans, access her financial information, and misrepresent himself as her legal guardian to various financial institutions. Jake's face had gone white. I wasn't trying to steal from Maya. I just needed her to co-sign for a loan, and she wasn't answering her phone. So you forged her signature and lied to banks about your relationship status and her mental capacity. Patricia's voice could have cut glass. I thought she'd understand. She always helps with money stuff. Jake, Patricia said, pulling out a copy of the loan application. You told First National Bank that Maya was your live-in girlfriend who had suffered a mental breakdown and couldn't handle her own finances. You claimed legal guardianship that you don't possess and forged a signature on a legal document. These are serious crimes. The silence in the room was deafening. Maya watched her family absorb the reality of what Jake had done, not just to her, but to them. Because now they were all sitting in a lawyer's office, facing the possibility that their son and brother might go to prison. Maya, her mother said finally, her voice breaking. Please, he's your brother. He made a mistake, but he's family. Maya looked at the woman who had raised her, who had told her just a month ago that she was disappointed in who Maya had become. He's made a lot of mistakes, Mom. This is just the first one that's illegal. We can fix this, Sarah said desperately. We can pay back whatever he owes, get him help for his gambling problem. You don't have to destroy our family over this. I didn't destroy this family, Maya said quietly. You all did that when you decided to blame me for Jake's theft instead of holding him accountable. Jake finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Maya, I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but I didn't know what else to do. The people I owe money to, they're not patient, they don't care about family problems or missing sisters. They just want their money. How much do you owe? Maya asked. Jake's eyes darted to Sarah, then to their mother, then back to his hands. $67,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Maya felt a bitter laugh escape her throat. 67,000. And you thought stealing my identity was a better solution than admitting the truth to your family. I thought if I could just get enough to pay them off, I could fix everything before anyone got hurt. Before anyone got hurt. Maya's voice rose. Jake, you've been hurting people for years. You've been hurting me for years. The only difference is that now there's legal consequences. Patricia cleared her throat. I need to explain something to all of you. Maya has the right to press charges for these crimes. If she chooses to do so, Jake will likely face several years in prison. However, she's willing to consider an alternative. All eyes turned to Maya. She looked at each member of her family in turn, the people she'd sacrificed everything for, who had thrown her away the moment it became convenient. I want Jake to turn himself in to the police and confess to stealing from Mom's retirement account, Maya said. I want him to enter a treatment program for gambling addiction and stick with it for at least a year. I want all of you to stop contacting me, my friends, my workplace, and anyone else in my life. If you can do those things, I won't press charges for the identity theft. And if we don't? Sarah asked. Maya met her sister's eye. Then Jake goes to prison, and you all live with the consequences of enabling him instead of getting him help when you had the chance. The room fell silent except for the sound of their mother crying softly into her tissue. Maya realized this was the first time in 5 years that her family was being forced to face the real consequences of their choices. No Maya to swoop in and fix everything, no scapegoat to blame, just the cold hard reality of what their dysfunction had cost them. We need time to think, Mom said finally. You have until tomorrow at noon, Patricia replied. After that we file the charges regardless. As her family filed out of the conference room, Jake paused at the door. Maya, he said quietly. I really am sorry. I know you probably don't believe me, but I never meant for it to get this far. Maya looked at her brother, really looked at him and saw not the charming, irresponsible kid she'd been protecting for years, but a man who had nearly destroyed both their lives rather than face the truth about himself. I believe you're sorry, Jake, she said, but being sorry isn't enough anymore. 6 months later, Maya sat in her new apartment, a bright one-bedroom with actual windows and a kitchen island where she could spread out her photography equipment. The space was twice the size of her old studio and cost the same amount, funded by the money she was no longer funneling into other people's emergencies. The call from Patricia came on a Tuesday afternoon, just as Maya was reviewing prints from her weekend photography class, a hobby she'd finally had time to pursue. Jake completed his plea agreement today, Patricia reported. He confessed to the theft from your mother's retirement account and was sentenced to community service and restitution payments. He's been in the gambling addiction program for 4 months now, and his counselor says he's making genuine progress. Maya felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and something that might have been hope, and the identity fraud charges dropped, as agreed. Your family has honored the no-contact arrangement. There's been no harassment, no attempts to reach you through third parties, nothing. It was true, the silence Maya had initially fought for had become a new normal. No crisis calls, no guilt-laden voicemails, no emergencies that somehow always required her immediate attention and financial intervention. The absence of constant chaos had revealed how much of her life she'd been missing. There's something else, Patricia continued. Your mother asked me to pass along a message. She's been attending family therapy sessions with Jake, and she wanted you to know that she understands now why you left. She said to tell you that she's sorry, and that she hopes someday you might be willing to talk again, but only when you're ready. Maya stared out her new kitchen window at the small garden courtyard below where she'd been teaching herself to grow herbs. The message was everything she might have wanted to hear 6 months ago, but now it felt like news from another planet. Interesting, but not particularly relevant to the life she'd built. Did she say anything else? Just that they're all learning to handle their own problems now. Sarah got a second job to manage her mortgage payments. Your mother joined a support group for families of gambling addicts. They're figuring it out. After ending the call, Maya walked to her refrigerator and looked at the photo she'd placed there 3 months earlier, a picture of herself from her birthday dinner with friends. Real friends, not people who only called when they needed something. In the photo, she was laughing at something Marcus had said, her face relaxed and genuinely happy in a way she couldn't remember being before. The journey to that photograph hadn't been easy. The first month after cutting contact had been the hardest, filled with doubt and the ingrained guilt of a lifetime spent believing that love meant sacrifice. Maya had started therapy immediately, working with Dr. Amanda Rice to untangle years of codependent patterns and self-sacrifice. You taught your family that your love was conditional on their neediness, Dr. Rice had explained during one particularly difficult session. They learned that the way to get your attention and care was to be in crisis. When you stopped responding to crisis, they escalated because that was the only relationship dynamic they knew with you. It had taken months for Maya to fully understand that walking away hadn't been cruel. It had been the only loving thing left to do. Enabling Jake's gambling addiction hadn't been helping him, it had been slowly killing him. Covering Sarah's irresponsible spending hadn't been supporting her, it had been preventing her from learning financial management. Taking over her mother's emotional regulation hadn't been caring for her, it had been stunting her growth as an independent adult. Maya's new life had emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. She'd rediscovered interests that had been buried under years of crisis management. Photography, which had been her passion in college. Cooking, which she'd abandoned in favor of takeout eaten between emergency phone calls. Friendships that deepened when they weren't constantly interrupted by family drama. She'd even started dating again, something that had seemed impossible when her emotional energy was constantly depleted by other people's problems. David, whom she'd met in her photography class, was kind and stable and refreshingly drama-free. He listened when she talked about her family situation without trying to fix it or convince her to reconcile. He understood boundaries because he had healthy ones himself. The hardest part, she'd told him over dinner the previous week, is accepting that I can't save them. I spent so many years believing that if I just tried hard enough, sacrificed enough, loved them enough, I could fix our family, but you can't love someone out of their dysfunction. The real test had come 2 months earlier, when Jake had sent a letter through Patricia, not asking for money or help, but sharing news from his recovery program, and expressing genuine remorse for what he'd put her through. The letter was everything Maya had wanted to hear for years: accountability, insight, growth, and she'd felt nothing. Not anger, not forgiveness, just a calm recognition that his recovery was his journey, not hers. She was glad he was getting help, but his healing didn't require her participation or validation. Maya had written back once to acknowledge his progress and wish him well. She'd been careful to make it clear that she wasn't ready for a relationship with him, but that she was proud of the work he was doing. It had felt like closing a book she'd been trying to finish for years. Now, as evening settled over her new neighborhood, Maya prepared dinner for herself and David, who was coming over to help her hang the photographs from their weekend trip to the coast. Simple pleasures that had once seemed impossible when her life was constantly hijacked by other people's emergencies. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Lisa. Wine night Thursday. Emma's in town and wants to see your new place. Maya smiled as she typed back, absolutely. I'll make that pasta you love. The difference was profound. Plans that could be made and kept, relationships that existed for joy rather than crisis management, a life that belonged to her instead of being constantly sacrificed to other people's poor choices. As she lit candles for dinner, Maya reflected on something Dr. Rice had said early in their work together. Maya, you've been so busy being the person your family needed you to be that you've forgotten who you actually are. Recovery isn't just about leaving toxic situations, it's about discovering who you were meant to become. The woman Maya had become was someone she genuinely liked, someone who had interests and boundaries and the quiet confidence that came from knowing she could handle her own problems without creating chaos for others. Someone who understood that the most loving thing you could do for dysfunctional people was to stop enabling their dysfunction. When David arrived with a bottle of wine and a story about his day, Maya realized that this peaceful evening in her own space with someone who cared about her without needing her to fix them, was what happiness actually felt like. Not the adrenaline-fueled satisfaction of solving other people's crises, but the deep contentment of a life built on her own choices and values. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, full of people managing their own problems and living their own lives. Maya had finally joined them, no longer the supporting character in other people's dramas but the protagonist of her own story. And for the first time in her adult life, it was a story she was proud to be writing.